Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to call the Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, May 12th to order. Before we start, just a quick territorial acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, represented today by the Kasepsum and Songhees nations, whose stewardship of these lands continues to this date. Item 2, may I have a mover and seconder to adopt today's Committee of the Whole agenda, please? Thank you very much. Olson and Ward, please. Discussion? Seeing none, any opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on. At this point in time, I will open the floor for public participation. We did have one written submission that was received after the agenda publication and will be attached to tomorrow's agenda. I don't think any members have registered to speak electronically. None, right? And at this point in time, I will open the floor for members to speak, present their concerns or ask questions. You'll be given 2 minutes, at which time you will see a green, amber, and then the red light. I just would like to remind the public that comments pertaining to the following matters that have been subject to a public hearing are prohibited at this meeting. That's bylaw number 1700-10, code OCP number 1700, 2018 amendment number 10, environmental development permit area as amended. This time we'll move on to item 4, which is new business. Mairi, senior planner, you're going to talk to us about additional info regarding sewer and development. Mairi, over to you, please. You forgot. Oh, sorry. Yeah, before we go on, anyone from the public wish to speak at this time? Oh, you please come up to the mic, please, Mr. Day. Just push it on.
2 issues, but
and
I
can
can't
just
just
identify yourself for the record.
Okay, Tim Day, Charlie Place, septic conversion unit 57, which is the last. Tonight's meeting I see is about septic shaming, in that the people in Colwood that are on septic fields and have perfectly good soil for septic fields are meant to feel like they're dirty people and polluting the environment, from what I read in the report here, and I don't like it. There is no capacity in Colwood to have everyone connected to sewer, and it's misleading to tell people that there is. So I wrote a letter, and I just want to make a correction on page 2, which was, I just marked up the staff report. I put down 2025 year-to-date units that have been constructed. I had 82. The actual number is 129. So for 2023, there was actually 527 units, or 627 units completed. I don't know why it says 61. In 2024, there was 587 units. It says 55. I don't understand that. But anyways, at the 600 units per year, and the biggest number anyone's ever come up with since the start of trying to figure out how many people can fit into this sewer, is about, I think it's 3,000 or 3,300. So at 600 a year, everything will be done in a few years as far as sewer capacity. So why would you be borrowing money to run sewer connections to neighborhoods like the one next door here, when they're most likely to end up with sewage in their basement if they connect to it, because of what's going on in Royal Bay with the tripling of the density? The cost to the taxpayer is going to be huge. And am I out of time? Yeah, I'm just concerned that this is being put forward and that the public is not receiving the correct numbers, and I'm not sure that Colwood Council even understands the rate of development that's going on in the city. I understand, I can look at charts, I can see that the line for Colwood is flat as far as sewer flows, but if you look at the line for Langford, who has population increases, similar to Colwood in 2023 or 2024, Colwood had more than Langford. And look at their line, almost vertical. So that's what's coming. It'll be coming in the next couple of years before you guys come up for election again, that there is no future, and the capacity will be discussed in 2045. It'll be long over the capacity of Colwood, $25 million in infrastructure upgrades just on Machosen Road. And who can afford that? The people of Royal Bay don't want to pay for that, but there are sewer users. And as a sewer user in Unit 57, the last to be sewered in Colwood, I find this deeply disturbing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Uh,
Does anyone on staff have any comments on the facts and figures that were presented?
We can certainly address any questions that council has for us when people are.
Yep, thank you very much. We'll move on then. Thank you very much, Mr. Day.
Could I talk on another issue?
I'm going to just check around to see if anyone else wants to speak. I will give you a second 2 minutes for a different issue. Seeing none, go ahead, Mr. Day.
I would like council to encourage public engagement and to make people aware that right now this is being broadcast live. So try and get the numbers up for people watching these meetings so that you can look them up on YouTube and you'll see there's 3 people watching this right now, and it's not very good. And the Colwood website, I don't know what to say about it. 3 developments happening on Machosen Road. When you look them up in the Colwood records, they have no addresses. The one that just came up at 3333, I saw the people, I was one of the 3 people watching. Concerned residents all said they just heard about this. And that's not right. Nothing was accomplished at the meeting. And I heard that it would come to council on May 26th. It's not in the short-term agenda, and I'm not sure what's going on, but this council could certainly help to clean up the website, to produce some information and have the records reflect what's actually going on in Colwood. And those, instead of 4 zeros at the start, do as has always been done. The first 2 are reserved for the year. Since 2023 sometime, I can't figure it out. But it's like Colwood was incorporated in 23 sometime, because everything started at 0. So the things that are going on now, it's very hard to track because the new Colwood website doesn't give you any information as far as what's actually going on here. So I would encourage you to try and inform the public and try to get some public engagement going. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Second call for anyone else in the public. Seeing none, I'm going to move on to new business. Thank you very much. Thank you. Mairi, over to you.
Okay, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you. So this afternoon, I'll just be providing some information that is regarding the relationship between sewer and its impact on development. This is just provided as information, is intended to just supplement the conversation that you'll have as part of the next item on the agenda. So to start off, we just wanted to walk you through our existing local area service map. So properties that are identified in yellow are outside of the local area service. So these properties would have their own on-site septic systems. Properties that are identified in green are within our local area service and would be connected to sewer or would have the potential to connect to sewer. The properties that are identified in yellow are generally zoned R1 and are really a representation of historical development patterns within the city of Colwood. These are our larger single family lots, and the reason for those large lots was to accommodate the space that was required to install an on-site septic system.
Would you prefer questions as we go along here, Mairi? Okay. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I just thought it'd be easier when you had the map up because it's specifically about the map. So in our OCP, we've had a designation for a development at the corner of VMP and Latoria for some time. And it is shown as outside of the local service area on this map. So we recently looked at the North Latoria area, and there's only 2 properties, well, 3, because one is a 2-parter, and I guess they're both 2-parters, 2 separate lots that are identified in green of that entire area. Now, the corner of VMP and Latoria was rezoned something like 2011, or maybe it was 2010. And so I'm just wondering why it isn't reflected in the map, but we have other properties like single family homes that were added into the system fairly recently that are in the LAS on the map.
Joshua.
Thank you pardon me. Thank you for the question. That specific instance, I would have to take offline with our GIS department. But I believe if those green properties, those are the ones we're talking about, right? And then Latoria, the north side of Latoria.
Well, the one I'm talking about is yellow, and it's at VMP and Latoria. It's proposed to be 8 stories tall. It's been through planning and land use. It's been to council. It is an approved development. So I'm trying to understand why it's not included on our maps.
I think it's just because they haven't submitted their sewer application yet. But
Because I think
turn
the
back.
property at the corner of the further up Wishart Road, you can see a couple of little green blocks there.
Mhm.
Those are far more recent additions to our map. But I just it worries me that we're working from perhaps flawed information.
Okay, we can take that offline for sure. Thanks for the question.
So Mairi, while you're on the map, next time, is it possible just to maybe put a couple names of streets there? So it took me about a half an hour to figure out Noreen myself on that map. Honestly, it did. So next time, if you could do that, I'd really, really appreciate it. And the only other question that I have is that we have these pockets of sewer local area services, like the pockets, and they're smack outside local area service. Can you explain that to me a little bit, why we have that?
Thank you for the question. There's a global map that we have that shows the anticipated LAS, so it breaks up all of Colwood.
Yeah.
So when you're seeing little dots outside of what is considered the active LAS,
yeah,
those properties that are not yet connected when they connect, they'll enter that same LAS. So they look orphaned, but they're not orphaned yet. So the master plan shows which LAS each property will go to if and when they connect. So it's just a property that's connected ahead of time or out of order or whatever.
Makes sense, Joshua.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank
you. Please continue, Mairi.
Okay, thank you. So I think I'll just jump forward to the next slide here. So as council is aware, staff are currently undergoing the process to comply with Bill 44, which includes updates to the land use bylaw to enable small scale multi-unit housing. So one of the exemptions for small scale multi-unit housing is not connected to sewer. So basically, all those properties in yellow that are outside of the local area service are not connected to sewer. So we would not see any form of small scale multi-unit housing occurring within those areas. Further, the province has identified a threshold for lot size of 280 meters squared. So that is essentially the new standard that the province is trying to encourage municipalities to implement for development. We no longer require large single-family residential properties because we just don't need the space for on-site septic systems. Because new developments require sewer. We will not see any development if it's not connected to sewer. And when we look at these lots in the neighborhoods of the areas that are identified in yellow versus green, the areas in green that are connected to sewer are smaller lots that simply would not have enough space to accommodate up to 4 units to comply with small-scale multi-unit housing and the space required for parking and open site space and complying with other key policies of the city, such as tree retention. So next, we just wanted to compare some existing zones in our land use bylaw. So the image on the left is just a typical street in Royal Bay. And then the image on the right is a typical R1 neighborhood. These images are set at the same scale, so you can certainly see the difference in size of these properties. The R1 zone is certainly a zone of historical development, as I mentioned, and we will not see new subdivisions with that R1 zoning, and we will no longer see any rezonings to R1 zone properties. It's too cost prohibitive in today's market, and that size of a property is better suited for higher density if it's connected to sewer. And finally,
Just
yeah.
a quick question on going to the previous slide again. So is that is it grandfathered? So if there's some R1, I don't know if there's any R1 with beachlands at all. There's none, right? Okay. But anything that has that right now is grandfathered, or how does that work under the new rules?
So all of our new developments, Royal Bay, Beachlands, developments off of Latoria, they all have their own zoning, their own CD zoning. So we have not rezoned anything recently to R1.
Right, thanks. That makes sense. Thank you. Oh, so go ahead. Councilor.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask about this because it seems like what you're saying is that R1 properties will no longer be able to provide additional density. And there's lots of ways that we've been looking at providing additional accommodation units on existing homes, including ADUs and secondary suites. So I just wonder if there's a change being contemplated with that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So the province is requiring any new density to be connected to sewer. So that includes secondary suites and ADUs.
Okay, and we had a requirement for sewer for any new development in our OCP, and yet in your report, you noted that we weren't making that a requirement. So it kind of, I didn't understand why an OCP designation that new development needed to be connected to sewer in the OCP wasn't sufficient. Is that what you were getting at? That it's not good enough having it in the OCP?
Maybe I was going to add some context to the fact that what Colwood has done to add ADUs and secondary suites, the entitlement that is given to properties that are on septic, it's actually above and beyond what the province expects. And we need to align with the Bill 44 work. So part of the Bill 44 work that you will be seeing is amendments to the entitlement of 3 units on septic. So we are going to be shifting the expectation of ADU and secondary suite and multi-unit has to be associated with homes that are connected to sewer. That is part of the legislative changes where density has to be allocated on properties that are connected to sewer. And to your question regarding the OCP, so there's an OCP policy that says no development without sewer, but a prohibition for development to be considered should be embedded in a subdivision servicing bylaw. So in the official community plan, it's a guideline, it's a policy, it's an aspiration, but really to make it the law, it has to be part of how the way in which we review subdivision and development, and that's through the subdivision servicing bylaw. And you may recall the development of Donovan, where there is like bare land strata that is on septic, and
Yes.
it's 11 units, 7 units, I can't recall. So that is the type of development that will no longer be possible. Like if you are adding density to that scale, you should be connecting to sewer. On-site disposal is, as deemed by the province, not adequate to sustain or help us get to higher density.
So it used to be, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to wrap my head around this because septic sizing and approvals were done through VHA in the past, not through the city. So has that been a change?
No, that is still through Island Health.
Okay, so because there are a lot of properties in the R1 zone in Colwood that people either desire to put a suite on or anticipate that as their children grow, they'll be able to provide additional accommodation for their adult children on that property. And that relies on a septic system that they invest in and may have to upgrade at some point in time. Is that something that Colwood is changing, or will we simply be ensuring that we follow the VHA rules and strategies for septic service?
So, as I mentioned, one of the exemptions for small scale multi-unit housing is a sewer connection. So, properties that are not connected to sewer would not be able to add a secondary suite or an ADU because those are considered small scale multi-unit housing forms. So this is a shift that the province is requiring municipalities to do now. And this is why we are making amendments to the subdivision and development servicing bylaw to comply with the province.
Thank you.
Councillor Jordison?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to, so unless we're putting pressure on our infrastructure system on the lots that we can build on, that's the only way we can add the extra buildings. And so people that have large lots that have perfectly acceptable septic systems that could maybe use an ADU or what have you, they're not allowed to add to their lot because they have the space, but they have a septic system. And then, so now the province is essentially pressuring our costly sewer system that we don't have access to get more sewer. Like, I'm just not understanding. It just seems like any avenue to try and work with this bill is not in anybody's favor except producing large amounts of infrastructure costs and sewer costs and onto the municipality. Do I have that right? Like what?
So I think the province's view would be that is trying to get communities to urbanize. And to be able to do that, you need to commit to a sewer system to be able to add density and do that type of growth that they want to see in those communities. You need to have more than on-site disposal on small, relatively small single family, because the on-site disposal is still, it's limiting the density potential of large swaths of the community. As I said, I think once we return with the Bill 44, once we have our next check-in with council in July, June, August, we will have more details as to what the legislation means in terms of changes. What we have learned is that probably that we have given more density to those lots on septic than best practice under the current legislation would recommend. And I think is if we are trying to manage density and development, those that don't have sewer can stay quiet, single family focus, and then intensify the uses on those that do have it. The new regulations for single family, for the lowest density that we would have on lots connected to sewer is 3 stories. So that is legislatedly given to us. So lots that are connected to sewer will get automatically up-zoned to an SSMUH zone that will be a minimum of 3 stories, that has a much smaller lot footprint. And so it really truly is changing the way in which we think about city building and planning. And so I think we can have a deeper conversations when we show you how this legislation is impacting the way in which we used to think of lots on septic and lots on sewer, because it really is pushing us to urbanize maybe at a faster rate than we are comfortable with.
Thank you for the answer. Respectfully, though, it's not like a resident can just go out and say, "I'd like to have sewer," and it happens. It's not a resident's fault that they can't get sewer, even if they want it, because of the way that it's set up right now. So I don't like it. So thanks.
Please proceed, Mairi.
So yeah, I think we sort of went over the amendments that will be forthcoming to the subdivision and servicing bylaw and the OCP. So that will be as part of the Bill 44 work. And yes, we will be coming to council with an update on that in August. I also just wanted to highlight for the OCP, the majority of those areas identified in yellow are designated as neighborhood in our OCP generally, which does enable up to townhomes. So without sewer, we won't realize the ultimate designation of those areas either. So that is my presentation today. We really just wanted to highlight the existing sewer infrastructure and what that impact is on our potential for growth within the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Day?
I just needed you to repeat that last thing that you said, because you're bringing this forward in August, which traditionally is not a very good time for coming to the public with information. Everyone's on holidays, got their summer brains in place. So I want to be sure to try to provide early warning to our residents about that. So could you just repeat that last point?
So just to clarify, the update in August is just as part of our timeline in the process for Bill 44. That update in August is just summarizing amendments that will be forthcoming later in the fall, which is when readings will actually come forward for all of the deliverables that we have already talked about. There is engagement that will be occurring between now and then, but This is the timeline that we've established with council to ensure that we do meet the deadline by the end of December.
Okay. And it sounds like you're not making any distinction between R1 homes that might be on a smaller lot size compared to some, there's many areas that have half-acre lots, which originally were considered subdividable in the past, and at least many of them already had lot lines drawn on them, how it would be accomplished in the future to subdivide. And that is something that I have heard from residents as kind of their retirement plan, was that, you know, they would take their large lot that they raised their family on and subdivide and provide accommodation for kids or whatever. And I think that's a big change coming forward that I just want to make sure the public is really aware of. There may be not much that we can do about it, given that it's coming from the province, and I understand that. I just want to try to be really clear in providing the information out.
Yes, thank you. And certainly at our next update to council, we will be itemizing all of the changes to the land use bylaw. We're currently working through that process right now, but once we are aware of all of those changes, property owners that are directly impacted by changes to the land use bylaw will be directly notified as well.
Thanks very much, Mairi. Great presentation. And this is just for information only at this time. We'll move on to item 4.2, Josh Andrews, Engineering Head, Septic Systems Conversion Options. So over to you, Josh.
Thank you. Okay, so council, through the chair. Council already has the report in front of them, and the PowerPoint presentation today will take through broad strokes of the sewer expansion possibility in Colwood. So yeah, feel free to stop me as I go through. A lot of this information was presented in the sewer master plan presentation a few years ago, so council should already know most of the info. So just stop me if I'm going too quickly. So some of the history of the sewer in Colwood is that in early 1990s, the West Shore was finally brought sewer. And in 1992, there was a public referendum to ask the public if they were willing to expand sewer and pay for that. That was ultimately defeated. And so moving forward, all of the sewer in Colwood was developed by the developers, and those developers paid for that sewer infrastructure. So all of those existing homes did not receive sewer, and we've been operating under that since then, essentially. In the 2022 sewer master plan update, endorsed in 2023, it didn't identify an option for sewer expansion. And that's what I'll get into moving forward and what that might look like. As of 2025, so this year, 43% of the households are currently on septic systems. And that number keeps going down because of the amount of development we've had. The same people are connected to sewer, and we just have more and more development that are connecting. Some of the thoughts actually about the sewer connections, sewer, as opposed to septic. Both are reasonable and good methods for dealing with a house's sewer. So in rural areas where we have enough room, just like Mairi went through, a septic bed and septic treatment is perfectly reasonable, especially when we have decent infiltration like we do in some of the parts of Colwood. Other parts that didn't have as great infiltration have been sewered in the past as well, like the lagoon area. As we densify and in urban and more suburban areas, that sewer, like a septic system, is less and less feasible as a treatment option. So that's where you'll see more and more sewer being brought out to those densified areas to not just enable development, but catch up with the development and be able to provide a sewer service. So as moving forward, as climate trends it get a little more wet in the region, groundwater continues to rise. We might find that or septic systems are failing more frequently, but that is yet to be seen. I have some notes here. Oh yes, and the treatment standards. The McLaughlin Point, as you probably all know, is has tertiary treatment, which means essentially disinfection before it's outletted to the ocean. That's a new system, but comparatively to a septic treatment would only be primary, some secondary treatment in there as the in-ground ecological digestion happens. So I think it's fair to say that the McLaughlin treatment plant is a better treatment standard. Now, comes with the cost, of course, but wanted to point that out. Neither one is not necessarily better than the other. It's just what do the citizens of Colwood want. So yes, as I said, in the sewer master plan, we have the phasing, suggested phasing to expand the sewer infrastructure, and that is broken up into zones based on the proximity to existing infrastructure, local pumping requirements, so lift stations as that are needed to service different areas, the age of some of the different communities, as well as stuff like soil information, which we used to come up with this breakdown of conversion zones is sort of what we're calling them. You can see here, and if I have a better, I do have a better picture of the 57 different catchment areas that would need to be expanded into. The red zones are the first 20 or so zones that would be the priority. Start with those. Those are the oldest homes in Colwood, closest to infrastructure, and don't need additional pumping to be able to service them. So the low-hanging fruit, as it were, and typically the least expensive. And then the orange would be midterm and yellow being late. So most of those would need sometimes pumping, or sometimes the homes are newer as well, depending on exactly which zone you'd be talking about. In the sewer master plan, it outlines the cost estimates for each of those zones, both the pressure and gravity service, as you see sort of broken down here in a small snippet from it. The total is $103 million to service all of those zones. That does not include grants, because we would certainly be searching for and applying for grants to help offset some of those costs. But in order to expand, we have a few options. The developer-centered approach is sort of what we're currently operating under, where as a developer wants to build a high-rise somewhere, they would need to extend the sewer system out to that new development, and they pay for that. As it says there, we do have a latecomers policy where they might be able to collect some money from those people who front that new sewer. We only have 4 of those policies in place. So other than that, all of our sewer has been fronted for and paid for by developers, and thus those people who paid for the homes. The local area service. So as you already know, we have local area services in which those individual, as outlined, we have several of them. The areas which are serviced are the ones that pay for the service. So those who aren't already sewered don't pay for that local area service of sewer. If we expanded, we would be looking at a very similar approach where those areas that get new sewer would have to pay for the infrastructure essentially themselves. Now, the city, I can go into some numbers in a minute, but the city would essentially borrow that money under the city's borrowing. And those homeowners that front that new sewer would pay either a lump sum up front or, yearly over 30 years to pay down and service that debt. Uh, the aggregated LAS is the other option where I'll get into that. Local LAS is big. Each of the 57 areas would be their own local LAS. An aggregate could be where all 57 zones are treated as one single LAS, and thus sharing the costs, because the costs, as you'll see, will vary quite a bit. This is one example of a high level cost estimate of the zone one, for instance. It's for $1.4 million to service zone one. There are 52 lots, so that's $27,500 per lot. If you could pay that up front, of course, or over 30 years at the city's borrowing rate, you'd be paying about $1,600 per year as an LAS payment. And so that is for the physical infrastructure in the road that brings a service to the front of your yard. Of course, as it says there, your private costs would be the responsibility of the homeowner itself. So it's not just this cost you're looking at, it's also your private plumber to come and decommission your septic field and connect it to the road. That is an example for catchment one. Another catchment might be more expensive, and I have another slide of that, but I see there's a question.
Just sitting here doing some math here.
Sure.
Yeah, so my question is about that math. So in this look at what it would cost to put a sewer collection system in, we are not starting from kind of the end of the pipe where we have the capacity in the treatment plant, because I did a calculation based on our current 2024 population from StatsCan, and the CRD's 246 liters per day per pop that I found. And that brought us to 0.8 of a megaliter short for the 2024 population within the current allocation at the sewer treatment plant of 4.7 megaliters per day. So I did our population divided by or times the 246 liters per day, and that came out to 5,449,146, and we have 4.7 that we have in the plant. So that left us 0.749146 short if we counted just the people that we have here today. So my concern is that the cost estimates that you're using in your example don't take into account what it will cost us for the overages in the plant. Because there's no doubt that we are going to reach and exceed the capacity that we have reserved. So I'm just wondering why we don't work backwards from what our actual costs are for treatment back to what it costs us to collect it as well.
Thank you for the question. First of all, that shortage you're looking at is just because the 246 liters per day per pop is just an estimate. We're obviously flow much lower than that, quite a bit lower than that, because only half of our population is actually connected. So when you look at total population, the numbers are quite skewed at that point, right?
Right. So, but I'm talking. We're talking about a hypothetical cost estimate.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying we have this population. This is their ballpark, to figure out, and this is 2024. We're trying to get to 2045, 20 years beyond that. So in 20 years, our population is going to be a lot more than that.
So it sounds like you're talking about the CRD. Well, you are talking about the CRD, our allotment in the CRD, and the extra costs that we would get for the additional allotment.
Right, because we are paying for that allotment, and we will pay penalties for the overages that are quite significant.
Looking at it as penalties is not necessarily the way you can look at it. Colwood would need to purchase additional capacity. Now, there are methods to do that built into the agreement with CRD, not to mention the expansion in CRDs that CRD will need to go through. Colwood is the second lowest user of the CRD of their capacity of all the communities that participate. So
Excluding First Nations.
yeah, so thank you. So it seems to be very likely that almost every other municipality will be using their total capacity prior to us. Um, if we continue to grow at the rate we currently are growing, that's where that 14 years comes from, till we are projected to meet the allotment that we have. In the CRDs, in our agreement with CRD at the 90%, when we're using 90% of our capacity, it would trigger a negotiation, and the additional, whatever that treatment plant has at that point, can be reallocated from one municipality to another. So if we show up and we're at 90%, and it turns out that Saanich hasn't used all of their capacity, they're only flowing at 70 at that time, then we would work through the CRD, negotiate and purchase that additional capacity. Now, that's assuming that at the time, because this is years in the future, that the McLaughlin treatment plant hasn't expanded, because it has capacity to expand by another 40 megaliters or so. And not to mention, we're still waiting on the CRD to what their plans are for a future treatment plant, likely on the West Shore. Now, no one has that information now, but that's the timescale that we're working on.
I understand that. My concern is the new plant won't be free. The additional space won't be free. At the time that we negotiated the allotment in the CRD plant, it was willing seller, willing buyer arrangement at the CRD. I don't know whether that's changed, but I would like to have a firmer understanding of what that process would be at the CRD in order to understand that our estimates are reasonable. By my estimates, looking at our current flows, I think we are within 5 to 10 years of being at capacity.
Thank you. We do know that, I don't have the number in front of me. It was part of the, it's in the appendix actually, because when we came to council to discuss the allotment, we did contact, and CRD gave an estimate of $1 to $2 million for an additional megaliter. But that's based on what the other communities were paying for. So it's not a willing seller, willing buyer. It's negotiated through the CRD, and so we would have to pay for that capacity and the debt servicing for that capacity. Now, we would do that because we have so many more people on our service and paying for those fees. So it should be similar to the service fees that our current population are paying.
Our current population is subsidizing the current sewer users. 67% of the cost for the sewage treatment is paid by people who are not connected to the sewer.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
Okay, catchment 40 is the other example of a catchment that is much more expensive than catchment 1, as opposed to what was catchment 1? 1.4 million. Catchment 40 is $10 million, and an example of, even though it's a lot more lots in catchment 40, each lot would be paying $71,000, which would make the LAS payment, $4.4 thousand over 30 years. That's a little steeper, and why you might want to consider an aggregated LAS as opposed to the 57 different individual LASs. But that's not a decision we need to make today. It's just wanted council to be aware, because this is the aggregate example where it's about $103 million to service all of the existing lots. And so divided by the 2,500 and change, it's just shy of $40,000 cost per lot, which is the 2.4 thousand per year. It's just an averaging across the city. Oh, yes. And as we were just speaking about the CRD allotment, we're at 62.6 of our current 4.7 megaliters per day. Between last year and this year, we grew up 0.13 megaliters per day, which if we continue to grow at that, we will last about 14 years before we get to the end of the allotment, at which point we would negotiate for more. Yeah, that's pretty much it. This shows our usage compared to most other municipalities. You can see that the McLaughlin treatment plant is at about 70% of the total allocated capacity of the 108 megaliters per day. Now that, as I mentioned, that does have room to grow in the future. So the recommendation today is not to do this or not to do this. It is just to go to the community with a survey that is also appended to the report to see how the community feels and what sort of feedback we get to see, because we get a lot of questions from the community asking, please, or when, or please don't. So we'd like to try to get better numbers associated with that, and that's what we're asking for today, and we'd be reporting back in July with survey results. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Thanks very much, Josh. Councillor Jensen, please.
Thank you, Worship. Most of my stuff, sorry, relates to the survey questions themselves, Josh. I'll maybe circle back to that in a sec. Specific questions. I picked on zone 1 at 1.4 million. I take it this is just a theoretical chalkboard exercise by you folks in engineering. This isn't even like a Class D estimate.
It's a Class D outlined in the master plan.
Okay. All I can say about that is, well, let's fast forward to the $103 million to sewer the entire community. My faith in that number, as far as a large project in this community, the way it stands today with our experience with larger projects being delivered, is nil. It really is. I don't even know how to process that. I take that and I add a figure of like 10. And so because of that, I don't even know how I could get myself there. Just with some of our recent experience with larger projects, that's a comment. Sorry, Josh. So I don't expect a reply. Okay, so the 30K approximate costs, that seems high, because I mean, what's our current average hookup fee for a residence that we've done, say, of late, off the top of your head? Because I've heard of people hooking up for like $10,000. So how do we end up with a 30K as kind of a baseline? Because people are going to look at that number and say, I'm done. And they're not going to see past that.
Thank you. Through the chair, an average hookup is about $9,000, $10,000 or so when someone is right next to the pipe.
Right. Okay.
So this cost, this $30,000, is the cost to extend the pipe down the road, around the corner,
Gotcha.
And up the street.
I take your point. So if it's in front of your house,
that's totally different.
Yeah. Okay.
That would just, if the pipe's in front of your house, you're paying your $10,000 connection fee, and that's it.
Okay. Thank you.
This is an expansion program to bring sewer down every road to every home, and that's much more expensive. That's
my arts degree at work there. Thank you so much. So, I mean, I would love to see us promote as a way to get to the end, you know, where we want to get to in this, the right amount of time. I'd love to see the city, as in us, because you're absolutely right. I've had dozens of constituents and residents and neighbors come to me and say, when can I hook up to sewer? Oddly enough, not one person has ever said, can you come and disconnect my sewer? I'd like to go back to septic. So this is a thing for the community, and it's probably quite. I think when we start this discussion, I think we might be in for a bit of a ride as far as results go, and then I wonder if we back ourselves into a corner, as far as now we're going to have to start to think about delivering something. But I'd love to see us promote small LASs. I don't think we do a good job. And I've heard from neighbors in my neighborhood that are interested in connecting. I don't think the city does a good job as far as communicating the potential for an LSA and how to communicate with your neighbors. And I'd love to see us be more, take on a more advocacy role. And whereas a couple of neighbors come forward that maybe we're actually doing a mail out and actually assessing, surveying that street as granular as one postal code, you know, for potential for sewer on a small scale to come down their street to hook up people. Now, I know we've broken it up into zones, but if zone 1 street and zone 47 comes forward and says, we'd like to do this, I'd hate to see us say, well, no, you got to go talk to all the other people in zone 52, zone 50 as well. Like, I mean, do you feel where I'm going with that kind of?
If I may speak to it a little bit, I guess there's two different, pardon me. Oh, Ben, pardon me. There'd be two different approaches to LASs. One would be like a privately driven LAS, where just like we talked about, the community would come together and get votes. They would need to get a 50% affirmative vote before the city would consider. In this example, when the city is doing an LAS program of expansion, it'd be actually the opposite. We'd have to go to the communities and say, we're bringing sewer to you. A 50% vote will stop us. So the problem with the LAS approach and those that we've spoken to about an LAS or setting up an LAS to expand sewer, no one can organize a community to get 50% vote, because no matter what point in time, there's going to be someone on every street that had just replaced their septic bed and wouldn't want, of course, no one wants to, you know, connect to sewer after shelling out that money.
Yeah, so and there's a lot in there, and I think we're going down a bit of a rabbit hole, but I think the point is that I would like to see a situation where the city welcomes someone with an inquiry like that to say, yes, how can we assist you? Can we help you by talking to your neighbors? We'll leaflet the neighborhood and get some feedback. I think turning people, this is a real world experience in my neighborhood, turning people away at the counter and telling them, go talk to all your neighbors. Where we take that on and we have the Rolodex of phone numbers and we start making some calls or, you know, sending a letter out to somebody. I digress a little bit. Let's move to the survey question. I read the survey. Is this your team sitting around coming up with what they think might yield some results that we can quantify?
Ostensibly with feedback from communications.
Okay, so I guess my question is, are we married to what's written down there, or can I make a few questions and suggestions? Firstly, I'll start off with, when I read that, when those answers come back, I want to know how many residents in this community say, hell yes, we want to connect. And I don't see, like, there is no question there. If you had the opportunity to connect, would you, yes or no? I don't see that that's in there. I mean, we might be able to glean it somehow, but let's hit them between the horns. Yes or no? No, hell no, I just replaced it. I never want you to talk to you about sewers ever again in my entire life. Okay, thank you. Nowhere in this write-up, it doesn't say anything about the fact that the 30 grand gets it to your property line. I think we need to be very fulsome on that. This is the public portion. Now over to you to hire a plumber and bring it to your door. We might even want to put in some information like, this is an average cost for a plumber to you know, bring it to into your house and to decommission that. I mean, we might just have to ballpark something, but it doesn't specify in there anywhere that, hang on a sec, well, if I can do it for 30K, great, sign me up. But that's not what the actual cost is. Your question number 3, I wrote down here, I'm confused. I really am. I'm not sure what kind of answer. It's like, okay, well, I mean, I'm just confused. I don't know. What we're trying to assess here is like, well, who's going to tick off that they want to pay over 50 grand? Nobody in my right mind. I mean, I wouldn't. So I found it a little bit confusing and might be, painting people into a bit of a corner. Number four, you're saying, again, I was confused. Should everybody pay the same? Well, hell yeah, everybody should pay the same. But what are we paying and what for? And, is that the 30,000 or is that the 50,000? So again, I mean, I think I see what we're trying to achieve, but I just think we can be just a little bit more granular with this and just very basic. If the sewer is in front of your house, would you hook up? Yes or no? If the sewer is down the block and it can come to your house with a cost of, 30K, would you be interested? Yes or no? Like, let's just get really basic numbers so we can assign. So when you come back in July, you can say, this many people would love to hook up today. And then that would be meaningful for me. Well, hang on a sec. That's, 2,000 homes in our community that say they're interested or very interested. And again, some kind of scale like that to rate their interest, I think would be helpful. So, if people are absolutely interested, yes, or mildly interested, yes. I mean, it might skew the data a bit or might be a little bit more awkward for understanding it, but I'll yield. Thank you, Josh. That's some of my basic review of this, these questions. I have a little bit of a problem. I would have a problem interpreting the results. And actually, this was part of my arts degree, doing surveys and stuff like that.
Corporate officer.
Thank you.
My apologies to interrupt the discussion, but unfortunately our audio equipment has froze right now. So we just want to reset your mics and then we can just turn them back on. If you just give us
Okay.
1 minute. Thank you.
That's why you were standing there with your mouth open to see yourself sitting there.
Hey,
Thank you. Apologies.
No.
No, we had audio. We just didn't have video.
So
it's now
I'll
fixed.
need
Thank
everyone
you.
that wanted to speak to re-push the plugs, please. Counselor Day, then Counselor Grove.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if we could get a spreadsheet of approved developments and the number of units that we think are associated with them, so that we could do like a sewer allotment budget and kind of work back from what's already approved. And I also wanted to ask about the number of connections and the number of housing that we've built in the report. The numbers that Tim and I both found on the CRD website for what Colwood is doing, because we haven't been getting regular reports on how many things are approved or built in Colwood. So the CRD is the only place I can find information. Seem to be showing something very different from what staff's reporting. And I just want to sort that out. I'm not trying to be mean. I just want to try to make sure that we have good information that we can share with the public, because I think going to another sewer survey, because there's been many over the years, could be very difficult, given that not everybody's starting from the same point of understanding. So I don't think that we're going to capture our public's enthusiasm. And I am aware of some of the very difficult situations in Colwood. So the easiest way to describe it was, if you wanted to bring sewer to the top of Triangle Mountain, and there is a lot of homes that were built there whose septic systems were not ideal because of the percolability up there on a rocky mountain. But they also are extremely expensive to get to because you're coming through rock to create those lines. So there's a huge difference between the costs in some areas versus the costs of others. And likewise, there are areas where septic systems are working extremely well and have no problems. And there's areas where they don't work well. And that's not really, it's kind of a muddy waters situation. A number of the older homes in Colwood built in the early 70s were put in with single tank rather than dual tanks. And they, of course, are all failing. And the cost to replace those tanks varies depending on whether or not your field is corrupted. I've seen people who had to spend $50,000. I've seen people who only had to spend $30,000, and it was done in a week, sort of thing. So I just want to give accurate information. So I'd like to try to quantify the numbers working back from what's already approved so that we're not trying to connect more people than, it's all about managing timing for our sewer system because of, the expansion potential at McLaughlin. I don't know what the triggers are for that. I would like to kind of understand that better. So I would rather under promise and over deliver than go through this again. And I just also wanted to ask what our, if we could get a report to a future in-camera meeting about the legal implications, please, because we've been to court a number of times and I don't want to go there again.
Thank you very much, Councillor Grove.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this is a tough nut. I think if the surveys, which I'm always a bit skeptical of, if that's because it's coming out of the arts departments, that's, but then I have a music background, so I would never trust a survey to a bunch of musicians, but I don't have any contribution to make to the survey layout as Councillor Jansen was speaking to, simply because I don't feel I'm qualified in any way, but I do like the notion of trying to keep it very directed and very simple. Question I have is perhaps if we can think about or talk about the difference between mandating that sewer will be installed with perhaps qualifications to soften the blow for those that have just spent 50 grand on their septic, or for an older couple that is perhaps only going to spend another 5-10 years in their house, or so on, and as opposed to a voluntary hookup. Another item is this question of density, which now is allowed. Once the sewer is in front of my house, I know there's a lot of streets in Colwood where you go 3 houses, 4 houses in from the main road, and how can they not put up a 10-plex or a 12-plex? Perhaps they should now qualify for it. And then, of course, the subsequent problem around this urbanization, which the province is pushing, and where this bumps up to it, you then have the effect of the negative, perhaps, impact on the community nature of the street. And I know that there would be people that would object to it. I happen to live close by in a situation where I know there's interest on the street to sewer and perhaps develop, and I'm not sure what those impacts are. And so that would be, for me, one of the questions about how we would be able to control that, I guess, with zoning, but the province wants units, right? Wants density. So I think the message from the province is starting to slap us around a little bit with this push toward sewering to allow density at what cost and with what limitations or restrictions to where that happens. The cost element then too, the big one for me is whether we share the overall cost, which is my ethical background or my moral community background, is that we all share the cost. Although I do think, well, if you want a cheap sewer, don't buy it on top of Triangle Mountain. But, that's a bit cynical, and we all have our situation. So that's like a community shared expense thing. the long calculation you had in one of the reports about how it ends up over 30 years, the cost per approach, sewering or septic is interesting. And I think it sort of points towards sewering. My house was built in the late 50s. It was repaired 12, 14 years ago. It was upgraded the septic for a lot less than everybody else pays. Now the standards are, of course, were different, but it does work well and so on. But the idea of adding an ADU, but not being able to, because even a bit of work on the septic isn't enough, it shuts down those plans. And I know I'm not alone. I happen to have it personally. So because we have an opportunity, and I know there's quite a few neighbors, and I've spoken before about the fact of my street, 22 houses, when we bought in 2001, there were 4 houses with suites, and now there's 4 houses without suites. That density is not recorded, not reported in general. I registered my suite, and I think one other in the street in the area is, but a lot of them are just happening. And those are going into overloaded, outdated septic systems. And any argument about septics being environmentally and functionally perfectly fine is a bit hard to take. And I don't know that I trust individuals in the street, all individuals in the other city of Colwood, to follow the rules about what you can and cannot dump down your drain, because I think there's a lot of smudging going on. There's a lot of paint going down the drain. With a sewer system, you can actually track that stuff if you have to. So that's another element. And I think maybe that's all the sermonizing I've got to do. But I think that the idea of perhaps mandating somewhere would come in where we have to say, we have to take that tough decision and just say, we're going to do it, and not just tie it to necessarily new development. And I don't know how to do that, but it's just sort of a feeling I've got that we need to show some leadership with that to push the future urbanization of the city. What happens when we hit 40,000 people? I don't know. The survey idea then I think is good, but actually the real question I wrote down first was if you can take the information from that survey to each individual house, and that perhaps from that then you could develop perhaps like a road team that would go neighborhood to neighborhood. I think a little bit like Dean was suggesting, where you could talk to people to say, help them draw plans for their street or their little neighborhood. Because if a pipe is coming a long way to service a big service area, or what we call a small service area, then it really makes a big difference where you are in that block, but when you get it, I suppose. But if you break it down into smaller groupings and talk to people, you might get a better sense of cooperation if there was an expert in the room. So I suspect it would take a staff person, and I don't know, 2 people would go and wear equipment, riot gear to protect themselves from anyway, just to face the public in groups, and then you put that little road team on the road. I don't know. There's a lot of interest both ways, but I think people realize sewer is the way to go in the long run. I can't imagine it going any other way. So anyway, there's a lot of stuff in IDEX. There wasn't a question. There was a couple, but if you do with it what you can, if you will, but if not.
Thanks very much, Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, there's a lot of information here. I think for me, it goes back to Mairi's presentation. I actually go back a step further. To me, I think the question, sewer, not to sewer, ultimately has to be answered by the public. There's a reason it went to referendum in the first place twice, right? Is that this is a significant issue in Colwood. And there are many reasons why we're having the conversation, but ultimately it stems from public interest and even anecdotally, a lot of commentary that I'm sure we've all heard about. We want sewer, and then the odd person who's against it, and so on. But we need to really understand why that is. And then there's 2 approaches. You know, Mairi mentioned that one of the views would be that, you know, when you sewer all of these sort of legacy neighborhoods in Colwood, as I refer to them, you know, you open up that development opportunity, you open up the ability to add fourplexes and things like that. Now, the flip side of it is that can be viewed as a negative, right? You're going to have a view, provincial government certainly going to say that's a wonderful thing. You're going to have a lot of residents that say that's a horrible thing. I'm not saying one is right or wrong, but there's going to be a different take on that. But what that does demonstrate though is that there would be an ROI for property owners that wanted to capitalize and subsidize or densify. So you will gain property value by going on sewer. That is something that would be unequivocal based on the provincial legislation that's in place. So that's part of the information that would have to be shared with people that, you know, yes, if you're investing X amount of dollars, theoretically, you would be able to do this. That's just a reality with the provincial legislation. Again, not right or wrong, but something that we need to consider. The other thing about it is, you know, obviously looking at individual catchments, I think it's clear to me, and this is our second kick at the can looking at this, that it would be very difficult to go out to the public and say, okay, area 1, you're going to pay this, area 28, you're going to pay in essence 6 times that, whatever it might be. It's such a wide range, right? So an aggregated amount to me is the only logical approach. Happy to hear otherwise, but I see it as you know, it's a non-starter to have such a wide variety, unless there was some sort of decision to, you know, again, driven by the public to not proceed based on financial information. Around the survey, question 4 kind of piqued my interest, Josh. This idea that averaging connection costs across the community, and I would argue that the capital costs on this are high, but those on sewer through newer development have already borne that cost. So I would have a real issue with existing sewer users paying into the capital cost of this. You know, you made a comment, Josh, and I was going to call you on it, but then you said it yourself. You said you know, the developers bear these costs, but then you added really quickly that it's passed on to the buyer. And that was the key piece for me, is that's the truth, is that home buyers now per capita are paying much more than many of these older neighborhoods in Colwood. They're paying for the infrastructure that they get. They're paying for the sidewalks. They're paying for the sewer. Now the opposite side of the coin, as Councillor Day mentioned, is well, some of these septic users are paying sewer fees to the CRD. Well, they are, but we're also paying school fees. Non-parents are paying fees for those things. That to me is a very different thing than asking sewer users now to bear the capital costs of making up for the city, and even prior to incorporation really, and developers' failings on building the necessary infrastructure. You could argue that home buyers in the 70s, early 80s got a break because the developers didn't have to add sidewalks, they didn't add sewer, so that cost wasn't passed on to you to buy the home. So that's one piece for me that's going to be a real sticking point. I'm going to be vehemently opposed to any idea that it goes outside the aggregated group to the, you know, new developments that that, like I say, per capita have paid significantly more for both property and homes than historically, based on income and a variety of other measurements. And then I guess just going back to the survey itself, I think, you know, what Councillor Jansen was saying, I think there is a question to be asked. You know, we don't want to drill down too much on it, but to ask people, you know, and not in these words, but if price was no object type approach, you know, would you want to connect to sewer? Because I think that's ultimately the key question, the overarching question for everything is, you know, on a given day, if it didn't cost you a dime and you're currently on septic, would you want sewer? I speculate that with the exception of those folks who just redid their septic, the vast majority would say yes. But that gives you an idea, a starting point of, okay, who really wants it, who understands it. And then we drill down into the questions around individual costs, both for, you know, hookups to the capital cost to do it, as well as for individual property owners. And if they reject it, then you know it's based on cost. So I do think there's some massaging to do with the survey questions. And lastly, I noted it earlier, there was a reference to it, but there's nothing in here about like a public-private partnership on this thing. I know it's been very contentious in Langford. It's there's mixed feelings about how that's gone. But I just wonder, you know, just because somebody has done it before doesn't necessarily mean it's not the right way to do it. So I'd maybe ask Josh or throw it out to city staff if they've given any consideration to looking at the mistakes made and see, okay, is there a better way to do it that might allow us to do something at scale at a cost that's a bit more reasonable?
Thank you very much. I'm gonna really have to get everyone to focus on what the recommendation is in your comments, if I could, please. That's great, but that was good feedback.
I'm sorry, there was a question there.
Well, was there?
for staff, yeah, whether or not we
Oh.
look at a public-private partnership at all.
Oh, I see. Yep, perfect. John?
Through the chair. The public-private partnership would be the last piece if we decide to go to sewer, if we're going to go global, if we decided, if we went aggregate or if we went local. That piece of coming back to council after we do the survey, after we figure out, yes, we're moving forward in this direction, that would be a piece we bring to council with regards to, this is the direction we're taking, here are our options on that path that we want to take. And one of those options that we'll discuss at that time would be that piece about whether or not private partners, public-private partnership makes sense for the city of Colwood. I would agree that where it is bad and or good in other places, it may or may not work for us. We are significantly different than most municipalities, so it would take some time to do that. If I could, your worship, just to maybe help, because I did hear you say about speed. When we did the survey, we were trying to do those kinds of things. So with question 2, where we say, do you believe they should be sewered? We were hoping that question made them think septic or sewer, which do I prefer? So if we get 300 responses and we get 250 yeses, then the vast majority seem to want sewer. The question with the second or third question was exactly that question of, if you had to spend money, what's the most you'd be willing to spend? Like if it was 20,000, it's a yes, but at 30,000, it's a no. At 40,000, it's a yes. 50,000, it's a no. So we were trying to take this extremely complex, long time, many variables, and trying to really take it down. My esteemed colleague just said to me, well, why don't we do a QR code at the bottom and have a video explaining the survey and what we're trying to do, so that we can actually have them go, hey, if you're confused about the survey, go here and there's a video. I mean, Sandra's great at that stuff. So that's something we can do with the survey, is actually explain our intent, what we're hoping to get, tell them to put any questions they have down at the bottom to help us. So I think that might be somewhere where we can go with the survey and kind of help us out. And since it was his idea, I think he could do the video.
So good. Councillor Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I shouldn't wait so long to ask my questions because my colleagues asked most of them for me. However, my question would be, and I'll keep it brief, when was the last time we had some community engagement on sewers? Because I do think that we can do a better job of educating the public. I think a lot of people are confused. And I'm not concerned that we need to, or convinced that we need to sewer all of Colwood in the short term. But I think people need to understand when we send out the survey, and if there is an opportunity for some educational material in there, what does it mean to switch? Like, what does it mean? Like for somebody myself on septic that works and functions very well, there are benefits for me to go to sewer, but I'm also learning a lot that there's also some things about connecting to sewer that may change my opinion of that. But what does it mean for somebody to switch or look at potentially switching from septic to sewer? What does that mean to their immediate surrounding? What is their community going to look like? So I just would like to see that there's an opportunity for some engagement, like some educational material that goes out with the survey, and maybe an opportunity for an engagement session. Again, I'm sorry, I'm not sure when the last one was, but for the public to be able to come and ask questions about how to connect to sewer and have a chance to speak with the engineering team.
Thanks very much, Councillor Olson. And Councillor Olson, there's 30,000 reasons why you may not want to do this. I just got my question here just quickly. I don't think this is just my humble opinion, I don't think we're extremely effective in actually administering surveys. I don't think we're hitting the proper target markets. I don't think our traditional methods of using Colwood Connect or whatever we use, our social media to hit the target market that we're after. So my question is, how are you going to do this? Are you going to just drop these surveys off at people's doors, or how would we do this? Because I just think that that's the weakness of the survey system, right? We really want to focus and target this to you know, to those people in the areas that don't have, you know, or are on septic right now. So I think this is a really important question because, you know, aside from, you know, maybe massaging the survey questions a little more, but it's the how and how we're going to administer this because I've just seen some other surveys that we've done and we didn't even understand, you know, where they went to and who answered them. Really, we just didn't have a firm grip. So can you explain to me how we're going to do this?
Yes, thank you for the question. We'll work with our communications department, of course, but the intent right now would be to mail out this survey to everyone in the area that needs to be serviced. The intent would be to direct them to the Let's Talk page, because through the Let's Talk page, as people fill out the survey, we can collect, it's a much easier way to collect the survey information and, you know, have people, one of the questions in here is what zone do you live in? So we could collate that data and know how many people from each zone had responded to the survey, and try to have a better idea of what numbers and who has responded. So that was the intention, but the details of which we'll still work out with Sandra and communications.
Okay, thanks very much, Josh. Counselor, I'm going to go to Counselor Jordison for the first time, then you, Counselor D. Counselor Jordison.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to ask if it's possible that that could go out with the property tax notices, just to save some money.
Great question, and that's a great idea. If council does want to proceed with the survey, that would be our intent, yes.
Yep. Great idea, Counselor Jordison. Counselor D.
Thank
And
you.
I'm going to have to wrap this up.
Absolutely. I just wanted to follow up because I don't think maybe it's my memory because there's a lot going on here today. I'm just wondering if we would be able to get a spreadsheet of the approved developments so that we can kind of look at what our numbers are, because I did find it very difficult to know right now where we're at for, you know, we knew where we were at one point in time, and now I don't know how many housing starts we've had, how many occupancy permits. The numbers on the CRD website are very different from ours, and I'm not feeling very comfortable with those numbers. So I'm just wondering if it's possible that I could get just a spreadsheet of the approved developments with the number of units allotted to them for sewer. Is that possible?
Yes, through the chair, we'll have to get that information and get it back to you. But we know that the units or the connections that we provided in the report are numbers of sewer connections. So that's individual singular sewer connections coming from the property to the property line that might be sewering an apartment, for instance.
Exactly.
So the number of units per, yeah. So the number of new units is higher, but which is why it's so important for us to track the actual flows in the system and not just number of people, because we do monitor, and we had the Collier's report, we've had a number of other studies that project the number of new units coming. So we have all that information, and we do project, and that was what was in the master plan as well, was how many units are coming, what do the flow look like, and what does that need to do? So that's what our master planning looks at. When we're actually tracking our flows, though, to see when is the trigger point to upgrade that pipe, to upgrade that lift station, or hit our targets, we're looking at the actual flows. So that's what we're reporting here, and that's what we track in all of our lift stations, and that's what CRD tracks in our allotment. So we do project, but what's more important is what we're actually flowing at.
But I think it's important from my perspective anyways, as a member of council and a member of the community, to be able to look at it from a perspective as, is that number reasonable, right? It's not about how good you are at math. It's about whether or not the result you get appears reasonable compared to what you know is happening on the ground. So, you know, if we know we've added 300 apartments and, you know, maybe they're not all occupied at the same time, or there's lots of variations in why the flow might be different, but we want to make sure that there's enough room for every person who wants to be in that building. Also, because we have a sewer master plan and you're talking about potentially sewering all of Colwood, sewering some areas of Colwood, you know, what direction are we going? Are we going to be following the numbered plan that was laid out? Meaning that there are some that are early, some that are medium, and some that were later in the designation. Are we still going to follow that plan? Because there's a lot of development that's occurring in places where you would be late on the plan, but you might have 6 stories going up next door to you and be rethinking your retention and your staying with the plan that you had because you're more or less being urbanized whether you wanted to be or not. So are we still going to follow the layout by the sewer master plan?
Can I get Mr. Rosenberg to comment on this one?
Thank you, Chair. We can attempt to try to give you your projected sewer connections. Where it gets difficult is, for instance, if you approve a rezoning, it doesn't actually mean how many units you're going to get from the rezoning. If you approve a development permit and say, okay, this development permit's going forward and it has 50 units, if the development permit then expires and the 50 units don't show up. So we can come up with a number. I don't think the number has any relevancy with regards to actual connections, but certainly we can look at a density piece. I mean, historically on our annual service review, we do report our actual units. So we do have everything up until the end of 24.
Thank you. And Josh, do you want to take the second part of the question?
Mr. Mayor, if I could just interject for a moment.
Please.
There was a question about including the survey with the tax notice. Very, very, very unlikely. We have a postal strike that's upcoming. The ability to turn this around and get it out the door like we do with what we need to do with the tax notices, but setting an expectation of that's unlikely to happen, if not impossible. So, you know, really why we're at committee of the whole here is this is a pretty complex issue. And the reason that we brought this forward to council is, does this meet your expectation to go out to the community and ask whether or not we want to go forward with the sewer? That's why it's at the committee of the whole. So you get a much more opportunity to dig into the issue as opposed to when it comes forward to council. So that's why we're doing this. We're trying to see if we can get the committee of the whole for these sorts of issues so that we can move it forward. And it is quite complex. Is this the number one infrastructure issue that we've got? And is this where we need to be putting our staff time to make sure that people get sewers in a consistent way and in a way that's fair and equitable to all? That's why the survey has been included for your feedback to make sure that we're getting what you want to through discussing this with our residents.
Thank you for putting that context around that, Jason. That's good. Do you want to answer that?
In short, yes, we would highly recommend staying to the numbered order for all the reasons. It also gives the community knowledge, and you can plan accordingly for those future developments. And if they're later in the zoning, or if it's worth waiting X years, because you know the city has a plan, but we'd just need to establish that plan.
Okay, because I find that it seems like the plan has been very mobile over the years. Like it started with a referendum, well, actually 2 referendums that failed and was done anyways for development, which caused a lot of court cases. And I guess I'm just hoping that we don't move forward with anything until we really have a concrete plan. And I'm not feeling too comfortable with moving forward with the survey at this time with this information that we have. I would like our information to be more fulsome, and I would want the survey to come after more education. I guess that's where I'm coming from. I'm not opposed to a survey, but I don't feel that I'm ready to inform the public fully on what's in front of us. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm going to look for to council for a motion. We can absolutely modify or amend it as required. There is a recommendation, 2-part recommendation. Can I get a motion, please, and a seconder? Okay. Councillor Jensen.
Thank you, Worship. I'm conflicted a little bit. I'm hearing that this isn't going to go out with the tax notice, which is impending. I just question what a rush might be, and I find myself with a few questions. I also would like to see the actual survey come back to council. There were some questions there, so I'd make a motion to refer this to an upcoming meeting and seek some answers to some of the questions that council had. Okay, thank you, Worship.
Seconder on that? Okay, thank you, Councillor Jordison. Discussion. Do we have to actually set a date on that for referral? Is that correct? I believe we do.
Discussion is not the date.
Yeah.
So I'd like to know how much time will be next.
Okay.
Did you want me to provide some upcoming council meeting dates for consideration? I don't know if that would give staff enough time to answer the questions that you're referencing.
July? Okay, we'll set it for July.
Are we having meetings in
Early July. Early July, we are.
Your excuse, please.
Yeah. Is that good?
July's
Okay. Councillor Day? Sorry.
I just wanted to suggest that I don't want to neglect it, but I also don't want to push staff. I know that staff have a lot on their plates right now. I guess I'd be looking for a reason to pressure anyone to go faster. Then I'd rather do it well than do it fast. Let me just leave it at that.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Ward?
I'm just wondering what questions are we, like, why are we referring this? Like, what's this list of questions? I mean, I've heard 2 or 3 questions, most of which have been answered by staff. So failing without a list of very specific questions to delay the meeting, we're just sort of generically punting it forward with some meandering thoughts floating in the air. Like, I don't know, are staff clear as to what 3 to 5 to 7 questions they're supposed to come back with? How do we establish a date when we come back if we don't even know what these questions are? I don't know what they are. And if I don't know, I can't imagine that everyone else has an idea. I mean, maybe that's through the chair, maybe, you know, Jason or Mr. CAO, you can advise, do you have clarity on what exactly staff are supposed to come back with?
Well, I think some of the questions were, do you want sewer, yes or no? Do you want sewer at this amount of money? Do you want sewer at that amount? Mr. Rosenberg, do you have further comment?
I certainly have the, I guess, the affinity of what council's trying to achieve with regards to the survey. I think within our prerogative, we'll probably spend a few dollars at this point, Your Worship. Part of the issue has been, we've been doing this at the side of our desk with many other things. We haven't engaged any professionals with regards to what a survey should look like, how it should look like. We haven't used any professionals to really dig into, you know, costs and timing and, you know, various things. I think once we hear from the public to find out how imperative this is, we'll come back to council with, now we need some money to do it well. I mean, and I'm not suggesting we're not doing it well, but we are trying to get that intent. And I do think, mentioning the postal strike, it might mean it's going to take longer to get to the citizens, and we may have to do some kind of out of the box thinking. Like, I love the idea of the video where we can talk to somebody and say, here's our questions we'd love you to answer, Colwood. You know, would you like to have sewer? We just need a yes or a no. Are you on septic? And just like a 3-minute video where we ask those questions and ask them to reach out to us and see if that gets us 50 or 500. That gives us a chance to go through our public engagement process, our song at the park, those kind of things, and just get them to go to the website. The fact that they show up at the website would tell us something. If they can't be bothered to go to the website to see, would give us some information. But I think by July, we can come back with maybe a little more pertinent questions that we think may answer your questions, and then ask specific. We just didn't want it to be a 4-page survey. because we feel like they see 4 pages, they won't answer it. So we're trying to keep it down to 1 page, but I love that video idea and the chance to maybe engage with the citizens.
And I want to compliment you, John, on, for the admission, because I think that, that's my gut feel. This was being done from the side of your desk. So thank you for that admission. And, you know, you're making me feel a little more comfortable right now because, you know, the problem with, playing the cowboy here is we get cowboy results. So, I like everything you're saying right now. I think you're clear on it now. Oh, so sorry, Councillor Jensen, I didn't see you there.
Thank you, Worship. The question was asked, why are we referring it? I want to see the survey questions before they go out, and I'm not comfortable with those questions achieving a result that we might be able to vote on for the next stages. That's what I'm specifically asking for.
And I think we're going to achieve this by John's suggestions right now, I believe. Okay. So, I mean, I'm okay with the motion of referring it to July with the expectations that you just explained, John. So any other discussion on this at this point in time? I will call the question. All those in favor of the motion? And those opposed? Councillor Olson and Councillor Ward. Councillor Olson, Councillor Ward. Motion passes. And that's it for Committee of the Whole. I will look for adjournment. Thank you. Any opposed? Seeing none, thank you very much.